So press conference going on right now. I don't have an account on TSN, so they won't let me sign in to watch it. So I went over to the Canucks forum. Jim Benning's been extended. Apparently, it's for 3 years. Thank God. He's not allowed to lame duck GM. And here's the funny thing. So I've already done a video on Jim Benning and how I think he's a smart GM. And here's the reason that I like Jim Benning as a GM. He has managed over the last year to turn some diminishing returns into assets. Whether it's Alex Burrows, he's turned into Jonathan Dahlen, he's turned Yannick Hansen into Nikolai Goldobin. And while I'm not a huge Goldobin fan, the fact is that Yannick Hansen wasn't going to get better in Vancouver. And if you look at his stats in San Jose, he hasn't had a great year in San Jose. Um, he's drafted well. Pettersson looks like a steal with where he got picked. Demko is going to be likely in the Canucks lineup, if not next year, the year after. He's putting up great stats in the American Hockey League, though. He's going to make it really difficult for the Canucks not to just move Nilsson out and give him the backup job or the starting job. I don't I don't think Markstrom is a starter, and Markstrom's one of those ones I look at and I say, well, Benning shouldn't have signed him, but who else was going to come in? Who else was going to be the starter? Who else were they going to get? So, while Benning takes a lot of flack, and I know that, and there's going to be a lot of flack thrown at Canuck fans and at the Canucks organization over this move, he's done a good job. He's stocked up. I can't remember a time we've had more solid prospects than we have in Vancouver right now. And, and it extends not just from Pettersson and Demko. And Hugh Levy is still having a decent year, even though we take a lot of flack for drafting him. And certainly I wasn't happy with him being drafted ahead of Tkachuk. And he may never be worth what Matt Tkachuk is to Calgary. But if he can come in and play for the Canucks next year on the blue line, then that's going to help, because the blue line's kind of been a bit of a mess lately. When Jim Benning was hired, he came in with a team that was overpaid, and there was a lot of no trade clauses he had to navigate his way through. Burrows was very, very adamant he didn't want to get moved, and he wasn't going to be traded. That's why when I hear Edler saying the same thing, it's like, okay, well, guess what? If the team's going to decide to trade you, you're probably going to get talked into it. This is why when I hear somebody say, "Oh, well, this team can't do anything because they got these no movement clauses and no trade clauses," you can get a player to waive those, especially if your team's absolutely at the bottom of the league or near it. And the Canucks have been at the bottom, and they're going to be there. Next year should be the start of a turnaround. I don't expect them to make the playoffs necessarily next year either, but there's hope, and there's prospects, and it goes beyond those top guys, because you've got guys like Cole Lind and Adam Gaudette, and we don't know what they're going to do. And sure, there's going to be some massive flameouts. There's going to be at least one prospect for the Canucks that looks great, and then it's the NHL, and he's Emerson Edom. He's fast, but he's not necessarily got hands for the NHL, and that's okay. That happens. When you can turn a Hunter Shinkarik into Marcus Granlund, and we can debate Marcus Granlund whether or not he's having a good year, but he's still a better player than Hunter Shinkarik at this point, and I can't see Shinkarik ever being a regular NHLer. You did something right. So he takes a lot of flack for the moves that didn't work out. I get that. He takes flack for extending Brandon Sutter. He takes flack for signing Louis Eriksson. The funny thing is, if Eriksson hadn't been signed by Vancouver, somebody else would have given him the exact same contract. So while Vancouver gets flack for it, it's not like Eriksson was coming off of a poor year, or there weren't other teams that were lined up to give him the exact same amount of money and term. Um, when these long-term contracts work out, you look like a genius, and when they fail, you look like an idiot. I personally am very happy that Jim Benning is staying in Vancouver. I think Jim Benning is, if I had to rank him with GMs for the Canucks, and I've been asked to do a video on that before, and it goes back for quite a while, and I haven't done it, but I would put him ahead of Mike Gillis. I might put him ahead of Brian Burke, because what Burke did is, when he was GM, basically was very similar to what was done by Pat Quinn. Quinn was to me the best GM the Canucks ever had. But again, he was known as Stan Pat, because he made his moves, made great moves at the start, and then he just stopped. I was like, all right, we're just going to leave it as it is. This team won the division. We're just going to leave it. And I would put I would definitely put Benning ahead of Dave Nonis. Nonis, the smartest move Nonis made was bringing in Luongo, and then after that there was a lot of mistakes made. There were a lot of draft picks that just flew out the door for scrubs back. Guys who may have had great careers somewhere else, may have been solid guys, but they either didn't last in Vancouver or they weren't very good in Vancouver. Benning's job is a thankless one. There's always armchair quarterbacks like ourselves who want to, tear apart every move that a GM makes. I've done videos on it. And when I did one on Gar Snow, I was surprised by how well he's done in most of his moves and most of the things he's done. You have 31 GMs in the NHL. Only one of them will win the Stanley Cup. The other 30 will be disappointed. I don't expect Benning to stop being disappointed for a while, but at the very least, there's hope. And I agree with him staying. And now we can take all that Ken Holland crap and throw it out. I never for a moment believed that Linden was going to fire Jim Benning. I never for a moment believed Ken Holland was coming in to fix what's wrong with the Canucks. You looking at Detroit right now? You looking at the contracts they got and saying that guy can come in and fix us? No, 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 no. There are very few GMs that I would say fire Benning and go get him, because there's a lot of good GMs in the NHL. There's very few that I look at and say he has transformed a franchise and made it fantastic. I would put Yzerman on that stage. There are a few others I'd put on that stage. I'd even still have Stan Bowman on that stage, even though Chicago's been struggling this year. But when you look at where the Canucks are, if you just look at the standings, it's bad. But every team goes through this, and for the Canucks, this is the kind of pain they needed. Now, does this mean the Sedins come back? Maybe. They might come back for one more year. Maybe they sign for $4 million each. Something in that range. It's not going to kill them. They're going to have a lot of guys on entry-level contracts. It really isn't going to hurt them if the Sedins come back for one more year. But either way, I do like the continuity I see with Vancouver, and finally we're not just firing the GM. One of my frustrations as a Canucks fan has been how quickly GMs can get fired here. Whether it's Nonis, who I just said he made a lot of bad moves, but he wasn't really given a chance to fix them either. And then Gillis came in, and again, Gillis gave out contracts he probably shouldn't have, but it just to me seemed like there was a hair trigger, and then Gillis was gone and Benning was in. So I don't want to see them go from GM to GM to GM. You look at the more successful teams in the league, and tell me how many of them have been reactionary and just quick to just fire the GM out. Oh, we missed the playoffs, you're fired. That never works. So staying with the guy and believing in the guy that you hired to do the job is the right move. Linden's done a decent job as president. Benning's done a decent job as GM. I know there's a lot of fans outside of Vancouver that can't see it, and that's fine. Most Vancouver fans get it. Most Vancouver fans get what Benning is doing, and we support it. Because there are a lot of pieces that have some value and might get moved out. I look at Tanev, and Tanev's back on the IR last I saw, because of course he is. But if anybody wants to take Tanev, I think it could happen. And I love Tanev, and a year ago I railed against trading him, but he's always injured. And your defense can only be so good when your best defenseman is up in the press box because he can't play. So while I agree, Chris Tanev's been the best defenseman the Canucks have had, especially defensively, in probably a decade, it doesn't really matter if he's always hurt. So if some team at the deadline wants to take a shot at him, I would not be upset with Benning for moving him. But we'll see what he does now going into the deadline. And again, it's smart. You've got a lame duck GM going into the trade deadline. Now he's not a lame duck. Now he's got 3 more years minimum that he gets to get this team in gear. And it shows that the Aquilinis, who would have had to okay this extension, it shows the Aquilinis are okay with the rebuild. The rebuild doesn't bother them, and it's about bloody time. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And hey, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.